Hey y'all, it's me at Authentic Fee, and this is a podcast on lesson number 136 from 140 life lessons I wish I knew at 20, aka FSB 140. So, lesson number 136 talks about loving yourself first and the importance of that. And so this podcast, we're going to kind of delve into all the implications of that, what it looks like and what it means, how it manifests when you don't. Because I got to tell you, this is a really tough topic. You know, it's kind of kumbaya, hug a tree. A lot of people aren't comfortable with it, myself as well. I'm not super comfortable with it, but we're going to have the discussion. So with me today is Suzanne Orlando, AKA the Anxiety Alchemist. Suzanne and I met on on Clubhouse, and it was just like, love at first sight. I'm so grateful for you joining us today. You have no idea how grateful I am. So we will kick it off. First thing I would love to know is how you got into psychotherapy.
Oh my God, that's like such a huge, huge story. So, do you want the short version? Probably the short version.
We'll take the medium.
The medium version.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the medium version? So the medium version of it is, I started going to therapy when I was 18 years old. I always struggled with depression and anxiety, but I never really knew what to call it. And then at the age of 18, I was sexually assaulted. And through that process, a very good friend of mine hooked me up with his therapist because I was obviously in such a traumatic state that he happened to be going to his therapist that week. And he's like, I want to bring you with me because you need to talk to somebody. So I went with him, had never gone to therapy before, but was always interested in going to talk to somebody. And that led me to my therapist who, after doing some work with her and really, processing everything I went through, but then starting to talk about the other depression and anxiety that I was experiencing, she started to give me strategies and tools and was really the first person that I felt really heard me and connected with me. And I was never a good student in high school. I didn't like school. I was not.
Don't feel bad. I flunked algebra. Anyway,
right.
Sorry, go
ahead.
Me
too. Oh, it's 100%.
My sister and I still joke about it to this day. I'm like, cosine stands for crock of crap.
You know what? And I still have those nightmares where I'm in, and I had, the algebra. I hadn't, I have the algebra in high school nightmares all the time. That's when I know that I'm really stressed. But so I was not ever, wasn't really invested in school. But when I was getting to know my therapist and I was going through the process, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh God, I would love to be sitting in her chair. I would love to do what she's doing, but I'm just not smart enough. I will never be able to do that. My freaking
talk. Yeah.
My guidance counselor in high school told me not to go to college because of my SAT scores. Awesome guidance, awesome thing for a guidance counselor to say to a kid, right?
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, so through my own struggle and process and my time with going through my depression and my anxiety, I did end up going to college. I ended up going for something completely unrelated to anything that I actually wanted to do. I ended up dropping out. I ended up going, it took me about 6 years to get my bachelor's degree in 4 different colleges, but I did end up getting a bachelor's degree in psychology because around the time that I met my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, and just going through my own process, I was like, you know what? I think I should try to go for I need to go for psychology. I need to go to school for something that has always just been a fire inside of me, even though I still didn't believe in myself, but I knew that I was being driven in that way somehow. So I got my degree there. And I still was connected with my therapist. I wasn't seeing her as much because I had gained so many tools.
Yeah.
But she was really instrumental in backing me. And she was like, you can absolutely do this. And she used to joke around with me as I got through my college process, as I started to apply to grad school, to go for a master's in social work. And she would, say to me, we're going to work together one day. And we would joke about it or whatever. Our relationship evolved because a lot of people might be thinking, holy shit, like that's so unethical to have a relationship like that with your therapist, but
not really. I'm like BFF with one of my therapists. I love love it.
Which is good, right? I love your therapist, even though I don't know her, because that's like, that's how.
It's a him. I love him.
Him,
I mean,
even though I don't know
he's
him.
incredible.
I love that, because one of the things, our relationship became, it became more than just therapy, in a
Yeah, of
sense. Like, she
course.
attended my wedding, she really became an instrumental
She
person in my
became
life.
a mentor for you. But I think it's
Correct.
incredible how
Correct.
if you would allow me to just comment
Yeah.
on your journey, it's incredible how you took a very what I imagine painful experience and transmuted it, which makes total sense now when I know your kind of handle on Clubhouse and on Instagram and everything as the anxiety alchemist. You
Yeah.
totally transmuted that painful experience into something that is basically a propagated healing for so
Yes.
many other people. I mean, you and I have done Clubhouse rooms together. I follow you on Instagram. You're always, telling especially women to kind of hold space, feel empowered, be themselves, and love who they are and show up as who they are unapologetically. So it makes complete sense. Your journey makes complete sense. And listen, I hear you. I had a very sinuous path in terms of like education. So, but that's another podcast for another day. I want to kind of segue into what you were just talking about, into basically life lesson 136 from 140 life lessons I wish I knew at 20. So, I've heard my whole life that loving yourself is the most important thing. And I think a lot of people, at the risk of speaking for other people, I'll speak for myself. I just assume that I did. Like, who doesn't love themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's incredible how it manifests in the day-to-day life subliminally, and you don't even realize it. But before I get to kind of those areas, I want to hear from an expert, because I can speak anecdotes all day long.
Yeah.
I'm not a psychologist by training by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just a Scorpio, and I think that's close. But I want to hear from you, kind of the expert perspective. What does loving yourself really mean, and why is it so important?
This is a big question.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Because there's not one particular answer, but what I can say is, I think if I had to summarize it, what does loving yourself look like? I think loving yourself looks like, one of the ways is understanding how to set boundaries.
Oh my God, boundaries.
And understand how to set boundaries in order to align with what feels good to you and what doesn't. Because I think one of the things that, especially when we don't feel good about ourselves, a lot of those of us who struggle with feeling good about ourselves, right, or that positive self-image, I think a lot of times we're so focused on that need to be liked, that desire to be liked, right? We're like,
women,
oh,
especially
like,
women, especially
right?
For me, also just from Eastern culture, and then also in the South, it's just you're just ingrained to be polite, and you're ingrained to make sure that everybody else is okay. And women nurtures, everyone else comes first. Everyone else comes first. Everyone else comes first. So I hear that loud and clear. Yeah.
So everyone, your needs are like, and if you think of yourself first, it's so selfish.
You're selfish.
And how dare you?
Yeah,
right.
You're selfish witch.
100%. So I think, that need and desire to please everybody else. And even if I don't want to do something, or even if it doesn't, I have to say yes to it, because I got to be the good girl. I got to please everybody. And what am I not doing for myself? What am I not fulfilling within myself when I'm saying yes to those things that don't feel good to me? When I'm taking on another task, or I'm saying yes to something else that doesn't really serve me, and it's spreading me completely thin, and I'm completely drained, and I'm completely exhausted, but I can't disappoint somebody.
Yeah. So
so setting those boundaries is so important.
It shows up. So you just touched on so many different spheres. So for me, what I realized literally like Q4 of last year, I'm not even kidding. It's been a journey, and I've done therapy for maybe the last, 15 years on and off. But it really just kind of hit home for me Q4 of last year, that how loving yourself unconditionally really sets the tone for every single, how you show up basically in every single aspect of life, whether it's professional, whether it's social, whether it's familial, whether it's financial, whether it's every single thing. And so what I'm telling you, there were days where I was listening. You remember that Whitney Houston classic, The Greatest Love of All?
Yes.
Oh my God, I love that song. I love
I believe the children of the future.
Listen, I brought my mocktail just so I can karaoke
I
to
see
that. That song, if I could give anybody some free advice, it would be to listen to that song on repeat, especially the chorus. Because learning to love yourself really is the greatest love of all. Because when you go to negotiate, it impacts that in terms of your self-worth. When you don't want to put yourself in social interactions that really cause you a tremendous amount of anxiety. I got to a point where I was just like, I'm not doing group socializing because I pick up people's energy.
Yep.
I don't feel comfortable with all the questions that come at me. So I'm like, you know what? No, you want to see me? You can call me. You can come to my house.
Yeah.
And so it just what you just said about boundaries, I can't tell you, I'm getting excited because it just hits home for me.
Yeah.
It hits home for me. And I don't think people realize that that's a tangible manifestation of loving yourself, of saying no to other people.
Yep. Yeah. And it feels really hard, and it feels real. And I'm not downplaying it and saying that it's easy, because it's not. It's a process. It takes a lot of steps and consistency to be able to learn how to do that. Because not all of us, most of us probably don't know how to do that. We have to learn how to do that. But once you're able to step into that space and you see the results it has for you, and you feel, wow, I said no to that committee that I really didn't feel like being a part of, and they're all meeting tonight, and I'm
that FOMO
doing me at home.
The
FOMO
or the FOMO is the son of a gun. I'm going to drink to that.
The FOMO, but you could also twist it, which I think is so healthy, and say JOMO. Do you know the JOMO? Do you know what the JOMO is? The JOMO is the joy of missing out.
Oh my God.
I don't have to do something that I don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hashtagging this JOMO.
JOMO. It's so true though. Like, I don't have to, I'm home under my covers. I'm watching that Netflix show. And I feel, and I don't have to be out with my anxiety, with my stress, doing something I don't want to do, having these like conversations that are just conversations to have because I'm trying to be part of it. Filler conversations. Perfect.
So you talked about two things. So one is a minute ago you mentioned kind of being polite and worrying about what other people think, and then I want to come back to anxiety. So I think for me, the healthy boundaries was like paramount. Number one thing I learned. Even with work, saying nope, that's not my scope, or no, I can't do it, or no. It's just no. So not worrying about if a person sits in the anchor of loving themselves, I love and accept myself. Done. That's the primary premise for making decisions. I find myself less worried. I mean, I think about it, but I find myself less worried about how others are going to receive me. I'm worried more about how I'm going to receive and sit with myself. And so if it upsets somebody else, not in a disrespectful way, but if it upsets someone else, that's not on me. That's on them. Yeah.
That's right.
And I think that's the second kind of tangible manifestation, or kind of like the undertone or undercurrent of setting healthy boundaries. It's not really worrying about what other people think.
Right.
And that release of judgment, that fear of judgment is such of a son of a gun, because you want to people please.
Yes. Yep. It's so true. And the what you said is not being attached to the person's, whether they judge me or not being attached to the outcome, and not
my monkey, not my circus,
not my monkey, not my circus, and not my responsibility. If when I set my boundary and hold my boundary and say no for whatever it is I'm saying no to, the other person's allowed to feel disappointed, but I'm not responsible for their disappointment. I'm not responsible. Right? I'm not responsible.
My priority is my sanity.
And if they come back and they say, well, screw you for saying no, then maybe not my people.
Right.
Maybe not my person. Maybe that's, why do I want to be right? Right. Not my circus, not my monkeys. but maybe maybe that defines for me that I don't have to speak ill of them. Like they could be a fine person. I could enjoy their time, but because they're not respecting my place and they're not seeing it from my perspective, even though they are disappointed, that I might have to rethink that connection, you know?
Why? So why do you think that? And maybe I'm projecting, but or being gender biased, but I really do feel like women struggle with this more than men.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I'm not sure if that's kind of the fact that we bring life into this world, we're naturally nurturers, or if it's socialized, culturally indoctrinated. I mean, what is it?
I think it's the nature of the, you know, I'm saying this very, I guess very lightly, because this is a whole nother topic I could get into. I don't like to make gender stereotypes.
Yeah.
I don't like to talk
I don't
through
either.
them.
I think human beings are just human beings and we all
100%.
But
I think you're 100% accurate when you say, you know, why this seems to be a bigger issue for women than men. And I 100% agree with you. And I think there is something connected to that nurturer side of us. But I want to draw a little parallel here, right? This little parallel that you'll understand. So if you think about, I'm going to talk about disagreements and we're going to talk about fighting, right? So arguing and fighting. So if you, and maybe it gets physical, I'm talking like, so picture like young, a group of young guys, right? And they're like getting rowdy and they end up getting angry and pissed off and they end up like throwing a couple punches at each other.
Yeah.
The next day or even right after the fight, they're like shaking hands.
Yeah. They're going to the bar and having a drink.
Now think about this, right? And it's like done. It's over with. Now think about
this. That's so true, by the way.
Right? Girls, think about middle school comes to mind because that's usually when this all starts. But you get into a fight with girls and there's such it's called like rational aggressive behavior. They come up with this aggression, this meanness, this bully like type behavior, right? This mean girl kind of behavior. You could get into a fight with somebody in 6th grade, and by senior year, when you run into adulthood, you still hate them for what happened you don't let go of that stuff. And I think I think that piece of it plays a role in just who we are. And, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah. But I mean, so basically kind of holding on to the memory, holding on to the grudge.
Holding on to it. Like, so if I feel this need to please everybody, because if I don't, they're going to be mad at me and they're going to be mad at me through the rest of my life. Right. And I'm going to disappoint them. And I feel like maybe it might be a connection, maybe not, but
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, listen, I think there are several threads here. I think, I definitely think that's one aspect, certainly for me.
Yeah.
But I also think kind of cultural indoctrination, socialization, like, you know, the girl has to be proper. To your point about conflict, women are conflict averse. So I'm a Libra rising, and so Libras are the diplomats of the zodiac, and so they avoid conflict like the plague. Yes. They just avoid it. It's a bad analogy right now with the pandemic, but you know what I mean. Yes. They avoid conflict. So, but the Scorpio in me is like, all right, I'm feeling froggy.
Bring it on.
Let's bring it. For me, it's like, I'm just going to go not head to head, but let's just have a direct discussion. Like, what's the issue? And so the Libra in me is like, no, I really don't want to fight. And the girl in me is like, no, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. But the Scorpio in me is like, okay, we're fixing to have this talk. Yep. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to be afraid of the outcome. And I think, I'll tell you this as well. I think for women in particular, if you're kind of in that seesaw of external validation, which I think is another manifestation of not loving yourself, kind of your own validation. Yep. You want to make sure that the other side of the table, whomever you're speaking with, is content, because you don't want to ruffle any feathers and you don't want to cause a fight. And so I had to get comfortable in knowing, I had to really get anchored in myself and get comfortable in knowing that the relationships that I have, the friendships that I have, are secure enough to withstand some shocks. That's right. And by shocks, I don't mean like malicious.
Correct.
Yeah, I just mean like a disagreement,
Yep.
or a difference in opinion.
Yep.
And I think that's really important.
It is.
Being in a place where you feel comfortable having a diverging discourse,
Yep.
without worrying about what the other person is going to think of you, and if whatever they think, buzz, like that's
That's
what we
right.
say in Arabic, like F it,
Yep. Yep. That's right. That's right. That's right. You have to say that.
But men, I think men, do that, but women kind of are like, oh no, I don't want to, and that comes up a lot, especially in socializing. I think
Yes, it does. It does.
100%, it comes up a lot in socializing. And then the last point that I want to say about this before I move on is about not coming across as too aggressive or too assertive. And so this has kind of been coming up a lot in the international affairs space, and so I think it's totally relevant, where women are seen as, you talk too much in meetings, or you're too opinionated, and we just don't, there's such a stigma around it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we kind of uphold that feminine archetype. Everybody's going to think I'm a feminist. I'm not a feminist. I'm just pro equality.
Yeah, of course.
So I don't think that makes me a feminist, but I think it does in this day. But anyway, and so I think a piece of it too is not wanting to come across as that archetype,
Right.
But what do I know? I'm just somebody living life.
You know a ton.
I'm just somebody who's living life. Okay, so I think we touched on this already, but for people who are like, well, of course I love myself. It's a given. What's the other side of that coin look like? And I think you touched on it a lot already, but explicitly, what's the other side of that coin look like in terms of it? And maybe some of the more subliminal ways, in terms of not loving yourself.
So we're speaking to people who don't love themselves, or people who love themselves.
So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh, well, of course I love myself, and the whole premise for me in this specific podcast is to invite people to think, because I think we were all on autopilot. I was on autopilot and just thinking that I did, like, of course I did. What's not to love?
Right.
but then I kind of looked around and just realized that my life wasn't reflecting that back to me.
Right.
And so,
okay.
for someone else who's like, of course I love myself, or who's pausing to think, what is it, what does not loving yourself kind of look like? If somebody wanted a picture painted, basically.
Right. So I think there's a couple of different angles here. And I think the most concrete one that I can think of, and when I say this is it's not meant for like those one-offs. This is kind of meant for, if you think about this, if this is something that happens to you consistently, or more days of the week than not. It's not we all have one-offs. It's not that. Yeah. So if you are somebody who, your day starts and you're like, okay, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna have breakfast, I'm gonna check my emails, I'm gonna schedule the doctor's appointment, and you have like a realistic, not too crazy of a list of intentions. You have, these are the things I need to do for me today, right? And you wake up and all of a sudden, like, you get the emergency phone call, and you look at your phone and you look at an email, and everything else that you've prioritized for yourself, eating, your basic needs, like eating, showering, making that doctor's appointment that you've been making to, looking to make, or exercising, the things that make you whole and make you feel good, and that you really need to, like, not feel off.
You push them down the list.
It's like, well, screw it. This is only my stuff. No one else is impacted. I got to attend to this. And if that's who you are, more days than not, if you're taking the stuff that you feel is important to you to fill your cup, especially with the eating, I know, and I've gone through this in my life too. There's so many people that I work with, whether it's private practice or in my online stuff. And one of the first things they say is, they're like, I'll go the entire day and I'll forget to eat. It's like dinner time.
And that's crazy for me, because I'm like, food first, but there have been times when I've worked grueling hours, and literally 12 hours will pass and I've had nothing but like tea and coffee, because I'm just running.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I'm about to pass out, and I'm like, why am I about to pass out? I'm like,
Right.
oh, I haven't had anything.
Right. The basic necessities, or I don't think I drank any water today, or I haven't showered in 5 days, or I
Yeah.
haven't, and it's not, it's, again, not the one-offs, or not
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
there are times where we feel like that's okay, whatever, which is fine. But this is like consistently, it's not that you don't want to do these things. You just are putting them at the bottom. You're constantly putting yourself at the bottom of the pile because everything else is coming at you. And I think that when I start to prioritize myself and make that stuff, make eating, make the basic necessities, or the things that make me whole, or the things that make me feel good.
Fill your cup first so you can fill everyone
Your
else.
cup, right?
Yeah.
I have to, when I'm creating a mindset where those items are just as non-negotiable as that email that was just sent to me through work. That's loving yourself.
Yes.
That's when and certainly there are people out there, of course, who are saying, of course I love myself, but sometimes I go all day without eating, or I've everything else is happening so quickly that I might go 3 or 4 days without showering. I'm the last on the list.
True.
I'm the last on the list. And if that's you more days than not, that has to be refigured. That has to be reconfigured for sure.
And I gotta say, and this, for whoever wants to call me a feminist or gender bias or whatever, to go for it, that's totally a woman thing. That is totally a women. We have a tendency to kind of put ourselves last, and I've consciously made an effort not to do that.
Yeah. I have just a little anecdote here that I used to get like seething, and this is coming from a professional. I used to get like seethingly angry whether it was stuff going on when my kids were little, or no matter what it was, when my husband would take a minute for himself and eat something, or take a minute for himself and shower, and I'd be like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, I'm ready. But then when I
men are, why need to do a whole other podcast on how men are programmed?
Yes,
they're just naturally kind of themselves. They just kind of think of themselves.
Yes. So where I was coming at it from a place of resentment, when I started to do the self-work and do this work that we're talking about, and I would say to myself, you know what? It used to piss me off, but he's filling his cup first.
Yes.
He's doing him first. And that's so that he could be there for us.
Yes.
And do what we need him to do for us. And if he's not filling, and he's prioritizing him.
Yes.
And as much as that pissed me off,
prioritize you as well.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's where I started to see things differently. So that's something. And I'm sure most of us could observe that too, right?
That is such a profound example, Suzanne. It's such a profound, because it really is very subliminal. Yeah. It's not necessarily as, for me anyway, it's not necessarily as overt as like, excuse me, for example, socializing, saying no to a social event because everybody there is going to like make you nervous or whatever, or ask you a ton of questions or whatever it is. That's kind of very overt, but something like this is like a day-to-day autopilot.
Yep.
What are you talking about? Of course I love myself. I just went and got a pedicure. I mean, it's like, no, it's a lot deeper. It's a lot deeper than that. So that's spot on.
Yeah.
There's another, and you tell me, we've actually talked about this in passing before in one of the rooms in Clubhouse, which I love all your rooms, by the way. Your rooms are so high vibe, and they're just so real. And they're probably 100% the safest spaces, I think, in Clubhouse.
Thank you so much. That means 100%. That's what I'm intending to do. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening.
And it's always just a real discussion, and it's you just kind of let people, you just hold space, and so and that's the honest to God truth. There have been times where we broach the subject of overachieving, and I got to tell you, I'm totally an overachiever. I'm totally type A. Like it's just ingrained. But the whole premise, and this is actually a different life lesson, but this life lesson touches on this 100%. This is lesson 134, not 136. But giving yourself permission to rest without guilt, and also not feeling like, which is a subtext to this, you have to be there. Okay, there's a lot here, but there's three things: resting without guilt, perfectionism, and then overachieving. And I heard you say something once in Clubhouse, which I just almost like fell out of my chair. Honest to God, because I was like, oh my, because I'm a recovering perfectionist. Like if you see my tweets and whatnot now, I'm like, oh, that's wrong. I'm gonna go back and retweet that. But I heard you say that perfectionism is a trauma response.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, perfectionism and overachievement is a trauma response.
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, if you can make that link for us in terms of resting without guilt and then the trauma response, and the link to loving yourself. Because
Yeah.
for me, it took me 42 years to understand this,
Yeah.
honestly. And I just turned 42 last October.
Yeah. So to just piggyback off of what you said, that it took you 42 years to learn this. Again, being the professional that I am, even though, do as I say, not as I do sometimes, I'm 45, and it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I started to connect all these dots that we're talking about right now and say no to things and stuff like that. So when it comes to perfectionism, in terms of like a trauma response, what is that correlation or connection? Well, a lot of what perfectionism stems from is that need to constantly feel in control.
Oh,
The need,
100%.
right? And if I have some, now whether or not that's a whole other conversation about trauma and what is trauma and what isn't trauma. We're not here to judge what anybody's trauma is. There certainly are events that we could say, yes, that's traumatic, but there could be other things that you can have trauma in your life on every level. It
Oh my
doesn't
goodness.
have to be.
It could be anything from divorce to sexual assault to a car accident to
to seeing something on the news to it could be
to being
anything.
to quarantine kind of a residue depression. Yes, I get it.
Yeah. And a lot of times this is just a quick psychology lesson here. A lot of times when people are, not everybody, but a lot of times when people do endure some sort of trauma, especially people who experience PTSD, there is a lot, not everybody, but there certainly can be a need to be overly perfectionistic or, because that's something I can control.
Yeah.
I can control that. Other things I can't control. So if I'm feeling like I am in control of this, you hear people say, I work best under pressure, or I'm saving everything to the last minute. And I got to make it, or I can't hand this stuff in. I'm thinking like school. I'm going back to like school stuff. Like I can't hand this in until this, and this, and this. In my practice, I work with a lot of teenagers who are like, I need to get a 4.0. I need to get a 4.0. I need to get a 4. This idea of perfectionism, which has the opposite effect. If I get the 4.0, I'm okay for now. But in order to get the 4.0, I'm completely unglued. I'm completely anxious. I'm not sleeping. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm constantly on autopilot all of the time. I'm not filling my basic needs because those don't matter because I constantly have to do this. Does that make sense?
Oh my God. If I had a bell, I'd ring it right now. I mean, I need I'm going to get a bell for
you. Get a bell. Get a bell.
I will. I'm going to for the next, I mean, that's just that. I'm just going to do it with my.
Oh, I like that. Yes, you can do that.
That's so spot on. That is so spot on. And a very simplified, because I've certainly felt this, a very simplified, and it's really tough for me to even say this out loud, but a very simplified takeaway for me was, I have to kind of be. Nothing wrong with ambition, and again, I go back to women, people thinking that if you're an ambitious woman, there's something, you're too aggressive or whatever. Nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
Nothing wrong with wanting success, whatever success means to you once you define it.
Yeah.
But I always used to kind of think that I had something to prove, and I had something I had to kind of get to a point so that I can, for lack of a better way to say it, kind of be loved. And the reality is no. And this is a whole separate lesson which is basically a human being deserves love, deserves acceptance, deserves all of these things, starting with self.
Yep.
For no other reason except that you exist.
Yep.
Not because you went to an Ivy League school, not because you are a psychotherapist, not because you have a great career trajectory, not because you make a certain amount of money.
Yep.
just because you are you.
That's right.
And
That's right.
that was like a huge, and which takes me to the resting without guilt.
Right.
The
Right.
resting without guilt
Yep.
is
Yep.
tough for
Yeah.
ambitious people and kind of overachievers and type A'ers. I don't know if there's a link between, I don't even know if we have time to go into this, but I don't know if there's a link between type A and like overachievers and trauma and any of that. I think I'm just type A because I was born that way.
Right.
Maybe I was born that way.
I was born that way, right?
Yeah.
Lady Gaga, I love it.
Exactly. So, but you know, the idea, I really had to retrain and reprogram my mind
Yeah.
to be like, if on a Sunday, if I don't want to do anything but watch like Charlie Brown and
Oh, I
sit in
love
my
Charlie
PJs.
Brown.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, Charlie Brown, that's my Christmas cards every year. I'm not even
Oh,
Christian, but I send out Charlie Brown Christmas cards every year because I love Charlie Brown. I'm
I
an
love it.
equal opportunity participant holidays. But it took me a while to reprogram my mind that it's okay to
Yes.
rest on a
Yes.
Sunday and not move and not do anything. It's totally fine.
Without the guilt.
Yeah. And I think there is a complete and direct, inextricable link to loving yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's an awesome point, because oftentimes again, hearing this so much, and the word lazy, I hear the word lazy so much, right? I'm so lazy, using your example, because I worked all week, or I have so much to do and I just did nothing all day. And my response to that would be, well, most days out of the week, you're not doing nothing all day. And your body is telling you, is really fighting hard to give you a message. And you're listening to that message that your body is giving you, and you're letting yourself recharge. You're
100%.
letting yourself do what your body is asking you to do.
And that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah,
that's 100% okay. But as to your point, for those type A or perfectionistic people with those perfectionistic mindsets, right? That's like, you're completely beating yourself up because you're choosing to do that.
Yeah.
Because if you're not constantly moving or going or achieving or working towards something, then you're
lazy.
Yeah,
a bum.
right?
Oh, 100%.
You're not, yep, you're not doing anything, you're not worth it. And then the beating up of then you're beating yourself up.
Yeah.
Right. So even so back to what you asked before, if how people who identify and say, yes, of course I love myself, I work my butt off for everything I have, I do everything perfectly.
Exactly.
But then when I have a lazy day that my body is asking me to have, I'm completely beating myself up, because I could have been doing this, this, and this, and this, and this. And why did I spend my day sitting my butt on the couch watching Charlie Brown?
Yeah, exactly.
For a Sunday. But
100%.
That's where it comes in, where this is what I could do a little bit better. This is what I could do differently next time, and accept the fact that I need to recharge myself,
So if I had a cowbell, I would ring it right now. So you just said a really important word, accept.
Yes.
Accepting yourself. So another aspect for me that I kind of came to grips with is, and it's totally the underbelly of perfectionism, right? That everything has to be perfect, including including yourself. You have to be perfectly put together, or you have to be a certain weight, or you have to have a certain whatever car, whatever it is. Part of that, the intangible aspects of those are kind of the aspects of a personality that are difficult to accept within yourself. So I really, and if you could speak to this, I'd be grateful. I really had to get to a place where I kind of delved into the spectrum of my personality, the good, the not so good, the control freak, the recovering codependence, like, all these different elements, and get to a place where I just accepted this kind of the variance within my own spectrum, cleaned it up as much as I could, but accepted that there's some residue there that is just there, and it's a part of me. And I'm okay with it.
Yes.
You and I do a lot of things together on Clubhouse. I'll give this anecdote. And I'm really structured. And so I'll send you something, be like, listen, I'm really type A. And you're like, okay, no worries. That's fine. I've just, before I would try to hide it
Yeah.
and overcompensate with
Yeah.
excessive politeness.
Yeah.
Right. And like, please don't be offended. But I was just thinking, now I'm just like, listen, here's,
I love it.
this is how I want this to go.
Yep.
Let me know if you have something to add.
Yep.
And I getting to that place for me has helped significantly. But for anyone else, can you speak to kind of getting to that place of accepting the spectrum of your personality, of who you
Yeah.
are, basically?
Yeah. I think the two words that come to mind when you say that is good enough.
Oh my God.
Those are the two
Cowbell.
words.
Yes. Yes.
Those are the two words, right? So I have to constantly be perfect. I don't have to be perfect. I have to be good enough. I have to be good enough. That's what I have to be. That's what I have to be. Good enough is good. Redundant. Good enough is good enough, right?
Yeah.
And
I am good enough.
And I am good enough.
Yeah.
This is good enough. My hair looks good enough. My face looks good enough. My outfit, good enough.
Good enough.
Okay,
Need my hoodie.
Good enough. Right. And I think that coming to that, just getting those two words in your head constantly, is this good enough? And listen, it doesn't mean like I'm going to blow off some big presentation I have to do and I'm going to whip it together in 30 seconds. That's not what it means. It means I'm not going to destroy myself,
right,
and beat myself up to make something, in my eyes, what is perfect, which probably never will be perfect.
Absolutely.
Right? That perfectionism is probably a farce. It's probably the expectations like to the roof. It's so high. It's so unrealistic.
Yeah.
That I'm never going to achieve that. So I have to like pump the brakes and make this good enough expectation. And to your point, when you were saying, I've a while back, I would have overly apologized, or I would have downplayed my need to, structure things the way that I do. But now I'm just like, hey, this is what I want. This is what I want to happen. This is how I want to structure it. This is what's going to, and just a question, how much more freeing is that?
Oh my God.
Versus how you used to be?
100, because I'll tell you something. I just tweeted something the other day by Dr. Maya Angelou, God rest her soul, where she said, love liberates. Okay. And, when we talk about love, we're constantly, it's like this external thing. Mm-hmm. When I inverted this kind of love for myself, to myself, I feel very liberated, because now I don't give a flying rat's tail what anyone, because two reasons. My intentions are well placed, mm-hmm. And I'm not disrespectful. Right. And so I'm not bulldozing. I just know that I'm assertive. And so I'm really structured. Here's what I want to happen. Feel free to add, feel free to input, whatever you want. Yep. And this is how I am. And, and that's, once I started loving myself, I felt so liberated, and it literally puts the beacon out and you draw in your tribe. And when I tell you, I've known you for less than 2 months, but I totally feel like you're part of my soul tribe. Oh, because because you, we don't have to speak every single day. It's just like, I know we are like soul sisters, because and I've met a couple of women like that on Clubhouse, and it's just like they're like, okay, she has good intentions. She knows what she's talking about. Everybody's putting in their bits and bobs as well. If it works, we gel. If it doesn't, God bless you, and keep it moving. That's totally fine. Right. But it goes back to like loving yourself, and it's truly liberating. It is. It's truly liberating.
Yeah. And those are the pieces, right? So when you talk about how do you start to learn to love yourself, how do you keep it consistent? How do you start to transform? When you have moments like that, when you're like, that was really hard to set that boundary, or that was really hard to say that, or that was really hard to send that text or whatever, but you did it. And, this is an extreme, but it's coming from my anxiety. When I work with people with anxiety, most of the time our fear, if you think of like fight or flight, or you think of like go way back to like caveman ages or whatever, right? It's all about survival. So most of the time the core of fear is I'm going to die. Like that's at the core. So if you get through whatever it is, whatever difficult step you took, it's a hashtag I use often. It's, but did you die? No,
Right.
I didn't. I'm here.
Right.
I'm surviving. I'm breathing. I'm living. Nothing happened to me that I thought was going to happen. You have to bank that and say
Yeah.
to yourself, well, if I was able to do this then and it didn't yield any results where it impacted me traumatically, or if it didn't yield any results where I'm still here, I'm surviving, and maybe it actually felt a little good, I have to remember how that felt when I took that action, because that's going to enable me to do it
To
again
keep
and
doing it.
again and again, right? It's giving me that really positive input of I didn't nothing crazy happened when I
Right.
chose to do this, right?
Right.
And now I can do this again, and I can do it again, and I can do it again.
I can just imagine, for me, the whole self-love and self-acceptance was definitely a journey, and part of that is kind of being a third culture kid, and part of
Yeah.
that is kind of, going through, coming from a home where there was a really kind of tumultuous divorce. There's so many elements, but like you said, the spectrum of quote unquote trauma kind of, it varies among
Mhm.
people, and
Mhm.
no one has the right to tell anybody else what constitutes trauma for them.
That's right.
There are gradations, but getting to that place where I just kind of accepted myself and who I am, and loved myself and who I am, it really, it just, like I said, it liberates. And I relate so much, not to take away from anybody's struggle, but I relate so much. My best friend of 15 years is gay. He was on my podcast last month, and we had this conversation basically, and I relate so much to his journey, even though I'm heterosexual. Although I think my love life would be a lot better if I were a lesbian. But I can relate so much to that struggle of just accepting yourself,
Mhm.
when you feel like the outside world doesn't accept you,
Right.
in different kind of, whether society or whatever it is, and once I got to that place where I just was anchored in myself, it was totally freeing. And
Yeah.
I wanted to have this conversation with you today as a technical expert, just to, you know help you propagate your healing and transmuting kind of what you do, and the power behind what you do, and helping other people heal. So anyway, I thank you for being
Oh,
here
of
today.
course. This was great.
I can't tell you, this was a fantastic conversation.
It was.
Well, I'm sure we'll probably have to do like a part two, but
Yes, always open to do that. You know that.
feel
I'm
feel
not going to say no to you because I
you're
love you.
fantastic, Suzanne, and I love you too. You've been incredible. I can't tell you how grateful I am for our clubhouse, the clubhouse crew that we have on our public speaking
Yes.
platform. That's incredible, and I can just tell that you're helping so many people deal with the term that we all throw around pretty loosely, anxiety. I think a lot of people suffer through anxiety,
Yep. Yeah.
some form of it.
Yeah.
Uh,
100% agree.
so I thank you so much for
Of
everything that you're
course.
doing. Thank you for showing up today.
Of course.
And I just want to close out by saying that the whole premise for this podcast was to review life lesson number 136 about loving yourself first from FSB 140. And I hope whoever's listening to this, you got something out of it. I'm grateful to Suzanne Orlando, the Anxiety Alchemist. Do y'all follow her on Clubhouse, on Instagram? She's absolutely incredible. And I thank you for being here today. And that's a wrap, people.
Thank
That's a wrap.
you.